Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Peter Hall and I'm the chairman of this committee. Members and officers have their names in front of them for ease of reference. In order to assist the process this evening, I'm asked everyone to ensure their mobile phones are either switched or on silent mode. We would be grateful if you remain quiet whilst the meeting is in progress. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be filmed by the Council and broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewings. If you are seated in this Council chamber, it is possible that the cameras will capture your image. By your presence, you are deemed to consent to being filmed and for the use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting or training purposes. Finally, there are no planned fire drills this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately via the emergency exit at the back left-hand side of the room or through the way you came in. Thank you very much.
Apologies received from Councillor Mrs Darren Wilkes, Councillor Flagg and Councillor Phipps.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Declarations of interest. Item 2, please. Any declarations? Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting.
Proposed as set out.
Thank you very much. And seconded. Those in favour? Thank you very much. And we come to item 4, and we have Mr. Jonathan Ross presenting this, I believe, and it is the results of consultation on the car parks. Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. I bring to you the results of the consultation for the car park charges 2018-19. There are a number of recommendations there that deal with the schedule of proposed charges, a proposed virtual voucher system, allowing travel lodge patrons to park for 4 hours in the lower deck of Saxon Square, 50p winter charge that was introduced into car parks past winter, and some coach bays in Mayor's Mead. It was resolved in the last resources last year that we committee that we would introduce a 50p charge into Avon Run Road, Highcliffe Castle and Steamer Point car parks on a trial basis. That trial basis also included us collecting data, and I'll go into that data in detail in a little while. If I move on to paragraph 3, results of the consultation. We received 4 responses from the consultation. 3 were concerning the 58 long stay spaces removing from Bypass car park and replacing them with 40 long stay spaces at Saxon Square car park. And 1 response raised concerns about the introduction of winter charging in Highcliffe Castle and the effect that this potentially had on Rothsay Drive. Copies of these respondents are at Appendix 4. One response concerned a business being affected by removing the long stay bays from Bypass car park. One response from a resident of Hampshire raised concern that they currently park in the long stay bays and this was close to their place of work and they would be affected by removing those long stay bays. And also the travel lodge based at Saxon Square raised concern that by removing the 12-hour parking schedule meant that this would affect their patrons, because patrons then would not be able to park for more than 4 hours. As a result of this, I met with the travel lodge manager and the area manager and discussed at length how we could solve this problem. The solution we put to them was that we could invoke a voucher system which is part of our software that we use for our virtual parking, and it's designed for agencies like the Travelodge, where they can log on and buy permits or vouchers at will. This would involve those buying the vouchers up front from the council, so we're never at loss, and then selling them to their guests. There is a charge to this, and the charge is £1,500 to be paid for the initial software configuration, which we have proposed that the Travelodge pay, and also 25 pence per voucher purchased, and that would be paid for by the Travelodge. We've discussed this with the Travelodge, and they've given an indication that they would be happy to pay it. They haven't fully confirmed, but they would be happy to pay it after further discussion. If I move on to paragraph 4, introduction of winter charging, results of data analysis. We were asked to look at the parking in Rossday Drive because there were fears that residents could be put at risk when we introduced the 50 pence charge into the Highcliffe Castle car park, and therefore people may have selected to park on the unrestricted roads in that area. And we took readings of number of cars parked at the end of February-March 2017, and subsequently from October up until near the end of January 18. And the results for that are at Appendix 5. We also did some analysis on how much income we were raising from the winter charging, and based on the figures so far, it appears that we'll raise in the region of £22,000 for the 6 months of winter charging at 50 pence parking all day. The results of the data collection have indicated to us that there is no increased parking on Rossday Drive for any period at any time. In fact, for one period, it actually showed that parking decreased. If I move on to paragraph 5, removal of coach bays from Mayor's Mead car park. This was looked at as a way of creating additional spaces in a much needed area for parking, and it's been assessed that we could create 23 additional spaces in Mayor's Mead, this work has been agreed to go ahead as part of the funded configuration works for the car parks. As part of this, we looked at the possibility of putting coaches in Willow Way car park. And we did this, and I presented there a small report on how much that would cost. I would remind members that the recommendation was and still is to put coaches at Highcliffe Clifftop car park and not Willow Way. Mr. Chairman, that's my report. The recommendations are there to support that report, if I can offer any more assistance.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for that comprehensive report. Councillor Bernie Davis, please.
Thank you, Chairman. John, can I ask you a question? You said you did you checked the figures for Rossday Drive. Did you look at Avon Run Road as well? Because we've had a complaint about the cars not being used in that car park.
Certainly. We didn't count the figures in Avon Run Road. We have spoken to Dorset County Council and asked that they monitor that area, and they are continually monitoring it, and will give feedback to us on the risks that perceived there with parking on the road, but we haven't monitored that, no.
Could I ask one more question, please, Chairman?
Certainly.
On your report, can we go to page 15, Appendix 1, please. We're talking about Saxon Square. Obviously, parking for up to 12 hours is non-applicable. And bearing in mind, these scheduled parking charges are going to be from the 1st of April this year. Okay, to page 15, Appendix 1. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, Saxon Square, it says up to 12 hours, non-applicable.
Yes.
It's a schedule of charges from the 1st of April this year.
Yes.
If you go to the end of that grid there, it says daytime stays exceeding 4 hours in Saxon Square will not be permitted, and yet we're putting 40 long-term bays there.
They will be reserved bays, or they're proposed to be reserved bays, 40. So they would only be used by permit holders, not for people entering the car park to buy a ticket.
Ah, that puts a different light on things then. We'll discuss that later. Thank you.
Councillor Leslie Dedman.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask the officer if Dorset County Council Highways are going to actually carry on monitoring? Well, if they say they are, but for how long will they do that, do you think? I mean, are we talking 3 months, 6 months, or this time next year, really, for the winter period?
Yeah, I don't have an exact time, but they have agreed to continually monitor it. So as long as we really ask them.
Councillor Colin Bungey.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been down to Avon Beach several times this year and down Avon Run Road, and there's always been a whole load of cars parked along the road rather than in the car park. So obviously that is happening. I know in the summer months you do get the disabled park there rather than go in the car park and pay money. But in the winter, when the car parks were free, you hardly had any cars down there. Now there is a considerable number parking there at the times that I've been down. I just wondered, on the car parking for the Travel Lodge, I recently went up to London and stopped at a Premier Inn in Kingston, and part of the complex there is a multi-storey car park. Now they have a system there where you get your car parking ticket when you park, and you can stay overnight. They will validate the ticket, which means you get free parking. Basically, you put the ticket in the machine when you go, and it allows you out. But if you go over the certain allowance of time, which I think is something like 10 in the morning, you automatically then get charged. So I wonder whether we might be missing out on some income by not having a similar sort of system. Thank you.
What I would like to answer, Vice Chairman, Councillor Mrs. Trish Jameson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I? Oh, sorry.
I thought.
Certainly, that's an option we could look at. The option that we propose, the voucher system, is ready-made in its design for that. The bonus of it is it would be £8 to park for 24 hours. We get that money up front and consistently. We thought that would be a good way of managing. And I would just add that the Travel Lodge said that of all the complaints they get, it's the way people buy tickets for parking in Saxon Square when they stay at Travel Lodge. That the current system is not good for people buying tickets there, which would also be solved by the voucher system.
If I could just,
Certainly, Councillor Colin Bungey.
I just wonder, Chairman, that with the best will in the world, I can imagine the visitors arriving, parking their car, leaving their car to go and get the voucher and carry their luggage in, and by the time they get back with the voucher, they've got a ticket on it. Is there a way that we're going to stop that happening?
It's a very valid point, Councillor. We would anticipate when people make their booking that the voucher would be awarded at that time and the person would be giving a rough time of arrival. But that detail we can solve. I would add that it's a virtual voucher. You don't actually get anything that goes in the car, so it would come into play when the button's pressed at a certain time, and so our wardens can check it with their handhelds.
Vice Chairman Councillor Trish Jameson, please.
Thank you. Jonathan, when we were looking at the task and finish group or whatever, we asked about the parking for coaches in the police station. Has this been progressed at all?
Yes, it has. We've just received this afternoon permission from the police that we can use it. Our aim is to now get the trees trimmed back so that we can actually get a coach in. We've got a coach arranged to drive up there and do some manoeuvring to make sure it's actually possible. So that will go ahead on the 20th of February.
Well, I'm delighted with that because that was my suggestion. You used that and I think it's brilliant. Thank you very much. Bernie Davis, please.
Thanks, Chairman. John, can we just clear this up? You're saying that the 40 bays at the bottom of Saxon Square car park will be for the voucher system used by the Travelodge. But in your report, you say that annual permits will be valid in that car park, in the denoted bays, i.e. the 24-hour bays.
I think I just need to clarify. The 40 reserved bays are for permit holders who are being displaced from bypass car park. The 58 current long stay spaces there are being cancelled, so it's all short stay, and that is being replaced by 40 in the lower deck at Saxon Square. We're also proposing the rest of Saxon Square lower can be used by the Travelodge people who would be parking overnight. So that the Travelodge parking is nothing to do with the 40 reserved bays. There wouldn't be reserved bays or anything for the Travelodge. It would just be that they would only use the lower.
Yeah, I'm clear now. Thanks, John.
Could I just add, Mr. Chairman, that discussions with the Travelodge management company, they have indicated that they're not content to allow our lease to be amended to give us 40 long stay reserved bays. They want it much reduced. They haven't given us a number as much reduced, but it could be as much as half. And we just received that communication.
Thank you very much. May I ask a question then on that? Because we are short of long stay car parking. So could I suggest that you look at Wick Lane car park, which used to be all day. Could you look and see if that would be suitable for that purpose, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just take a moment to read out something I did forget when I did my report, was that we did have a couple of more representations. You have got those, so you are aware of those. Good.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ross. We've got those, and we've had them circulated by our secretary. Brilliant. Could I then, on that recommendation that we've got here, make sure that that the spaces that we may be short in Saxon Square for long stay can be allocated to Wick Lane? Could that be part of the recommendation? Any debate, ma'am? Any first? Any more questions? We'll go to debate. Please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm happy to go along with the recommendations in the main, but I want to stress that the Highcliffe Castle and Rothsey Drive situation, that's why I asked if DCC are going to carry on monitoring that area. I do have a lot of residents saying something different from what our officers are saying. You know, you go at one time, the residents say it's busy at another time. So yes, if that is possible, to keep it monitored, and then Chairman to bring it back if there is a problem. I mean, we'll only know next winter really, won't we, that it's increased. And I take the officer's point. I mean, sometimes you go and it's empty, sometimes you go and there are crowds, and there have been complaints Also, from the Steamer Point area, that people are parking across drives. But of course, it's like everything else. When you go, you don't see that. So, and the other thing is, I have suggested that the residents get photographic evidence. I don't know if that's actually ever going to be valid, but it might help a little bit. But yes, yes, I'll go along, but with that proviso that the monitoring continues. Thank you.
Thank you very
Chairman.
much indeed. John Lofts, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's now over 40 years since I've been living in Highcliffe, and the just over 30 years that I've been a councillor, and wards which have included the Sea Corner car park. I'd just like to ask you to ensure that the mechanics of deciding and marking up where the coaches go into Sea Corner car park and round it are possible for when that car park is full. I'm sure somebody will give you some advice, sort of course it is for a coach driver and all this sort of thing. But when you've got this spare coach that you're doing the testing with down in the centre of the borough, I'd be grateful if you could arrange for that coach to do a couple of laps or so round Sea Corner with somebody watching where he's going to make sure that the existing markup for the car parking, which is occasionally full, not very often nowadays, but occasionally is capable of being navigated by the coach or coaches that you put in there. Thank you.
Councillor Bernie Davis, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, having taken into account the recommendations of the Working Party, I'm quite happy to propose that we accept the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Trish Jameson.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to second. Although I still have concerns over the coaches going up into Highcliffe and back again. I hope that this is monitored, because I would hate us to lose the coach parties that are coming because the coaches have to go to Highcliffe. But apart from that, basically trying to sort out the long stay car parking, because I think a number of us we thought that we were getting 40 spaces in the Saxon Square, which we're obviously not, and we do need those long car parking spaces. But apart from sort of what little bits like that, quite happy to second it as set out.
Thank you very much. But does that include, which I did hope it would be, is the fact that you're going to look at Wick Lane? I think that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And the proposer, thank you very much. And I have Councillor Colin Bungey.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I beg your pardon. I just wanted to highlight that I didn't highlight in the report that there are actually no increases in charges across the schedules at all this year. I thought that was an important point to make.
That's very important. I think our residents would be very pleased with that. I was at a discussion group on Tuesday and they thought that was wonderful that Christchurch are keeping their car parking as it is, so no increase. It's brilliant. And also, I think to get that winter revenue from those winter charge of just 50 pence is great. 22,000 is brilliant. Thank you. Colin Bungey.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was going to mention that. It is good that we're keeping the charges the same, especially as our neighbours are banging theirs up quite high this year, I understand. But the 50p a day, I know it was contentious when it came in, but having been into Poole today and parked on a beachside car park and paid £2 for 1 hour, I think 50p for the day is quite reasonable. And whatever we say, you know, the car parks do deteriorate in the winter. There is wear and tear. The weather gets at the surfaces, so there is maintenance ongoing on them. So I don't think that's unreasonable. What I do have a concern with is moving the long stay car parks into Saxon Square. On market day, that is one of the busiest car parks. And you know, you see people coming back with heavy bags of shopping and bags of vegetables, meat or whatever they bought in the market, people coming out of Argos with big boxes, and if they can't get parked in Saxon Square and they've got to trek across to the Waitrose car park down under the underpass, if they can get in, we're losing nearly a third of the parking downstairs for long stay car parking, and it does concern me that that could have effect over a period of time on the shopping in Christchurch and the market, because people do use that as well as the car park behind Marks and Spencer's, because it's very easy to walk to and from if you've got a load of shopping to carry. So I am concerned about the long stay there. I'm not worried about the hotel. I think, you know, the hotel needs to be able to encourage people to stay there, and most of them can't check in until after 2 o'clock or something like that anyway, when a lot of the initial need for the car park has died down, and by the evening it's very quiet indeed. But it is the long stay that I'm concerned about, because it could affect the shopping area in the centre of town. Thank you. And the other point is about the consultation. I have to say, and Jonathan knows about this, that the CCA, Citizens Association, their consultation document went to the wrong person, who was chairman 2 years ago. He was away on holiday, so they never received the consultation document. So, you know, I know that we've been told that will be updated now, but the actual civic offices have been aware of the change of chairmanship for 2 years now. So what happened there, I don't know. Thank you.
Did you want to reply?
Certainly with Saxon Square, the reason that was chosen as a location for long stay, 40 long stay, was when the car park report was done, the consultation from 2020, the company that did that for us, it was identified that that was very underutilised and the long stay should be there. As a result, just recently, myself and some colleagues visited there on market day, and we counted 59 free spaces. But it appeared to be full when you looked from the entrance. As you looked across the car park, it looked full, but we counted 59. So we believe it could withstand 40, even though the management company have suggested they won't allow that many. Regarding the consultation, I take that my fault completely. I didn't update the list.
I'm not proportionally blamed. I'm just saying it was unfortunate that...
Sure. We'll check the list fully before we send out, again, if we do that exercise again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, and we can now go to the vote. But also, on the working party, Councillor Colin Bungie was on that, and we would have been aware of our proposal for the long stay in Saxon Square. Right, can we go to the vote, please? Those in favour?
Unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We now go to item 5, and we have Mr Dan Povey, I believe. Povey, would you like to introduce and carry on?
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. So this report sets out the proposals for setting a balanced budget for 2018-19. If I could just give you a bit of background, in section 3, the report talks about the local government finance settlement. This was actually confirmed yesterday, so I can say that there were no major changes to the settlement figures that this committee has seen earlier in the year. Christchurch won't get any revenue support grant from next year. The final settlement did identify the tariff adjustment of £375,000 for 2019-20. The only difference really in the numbers that affect this council, there was what you could call a slight tinkering with next year's tariff, which will probably, all other things being equal, increase our business rate income by less than £10,000. So that was the only change. They tinkered with that to negate the effects of the national business rate revaluation that took effect from 2017. So basically no substantive change to the provisional settlement. The government did announce another 150 million for adult social care support grant for next year and some more rural services grants, but of course they're not funding streams that this council attracts. Section 4 talks about council tax. So as we said in the provisional settlement report, there was some good news surrounding the referendum principles, in that, as you'll see in 4.1a, they were increased for next year from 2% to 3%. So a council tax increase is not deemed excessive by the government as long as it is under 3% or a fiver, whichever is higher. The officer recommendation in this report and the basis of the budget as set out is to increase council tax up to the referendum limit. So that would be 2.99%. You'll see in the table at 4.4 what that means. So it would be a £5.83 increase on a Band D property in Christchurch, which is 11 pence a week. That, though, is worth £116,000 in council tax income in the base budget to the council. I'll just reiterate, council tax is a relatively stable income stream to fund service delivery. It's a key income stream as government funding all but evaporates, and the government recognise this in increasing the council tax referendum limit for next year. The council has had an established strategy of increasing council tax in modest amounts up to the referendum limit. This has served us well in the past. It's allowed us to balance the books as we've lost significant amounts of revenue support grant without cutting services. So the officer recommendation is basically a continuation of what has been a successful strategy. Until we find out the final decision of the Secretary of State on whether he does support local government reorganisation, we must assume Christchurch will still be around in 2019-20 and will have a budget gap to address. So this is all part of the established MTFS. In terms of business rates, Chairman, that's summarised in section 5. As usual, in 5.2, you'll see a fairly complicated calculation of how we get to our business rate income. But it is good news. Gross business rates payable in the borough have gone up 1.9 million compared to this time last year. There are some significant new businesses, new supermarkets and new businesses at the airport. So that's good news indeed. Once you take into account reliefs that are granted, provisions for appeals and this council's 40% share of the business rate take, our net business rate income will be up by about 420,000 compared to last year. So that's really good news and evidence of the council's support of business growth in the borough. However, business rate can be volatile. It can go up as well as down. So members will see that we're proposing to put that excess into a supplemental business rate provision rather than building it into the base. An added complication of the business rate position is that after the 2017 revaluation, when a lot of businesses did see increased bills, the valuation office has brought in a new system for them to actually appeal them bills. And we haven't yet seen the effect of new appeals on the new list coming forward. So we want to be fairly prudent on that basis. Finally, Chairman, in section 6, you'll see some of the headlines of the budget. So we are factoring in for the proposed pay award of 2%. We are making provision for pension costs, but you'll see there some good news. Standstill Dorset Waste Partnership, and in 6.2F you'll see that we will have headroom of £486,000 in the proposed budget, which again is forecast to reduce as we see our fundings gap appear in 2019-20. The report at 6.3 onwards has got quite a lot of detail of all the ups and downs that always go into the budget. I won't go into any further detail, but we'll gladly take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Povey. Councillor Leslie Dedman, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It is actually on this 6.3. It's on page 41, and it's item 20. And it reads, the income budget at Highcliffe Castle has been reduced as a result of the retendering exercise for the catering concession. And I wasn't quite sure what that meant. Can you just elucidate that for me, please, Dan?
Yes, I can. I won't go into any fine detail in open session because there's a contractual thing there. But basically, the budget for next year is significantly higher still than the budget was for 2016-17. While we were in the process of producing the tender, we increased the budget for 2017-18 by even more. That seems to have been a little over-optimistic, but we're still in a far better position next year than we were in 2016-17. I think one of the difficulties with setting next year's budget for Highcliffe is, of course, it has been closed for a period of time for the Phoenix Flies project, and of course that does tend to dampen the income a little bit, so it'll be reviewed for next year.
Any other debate? Councillor Mrs. Trish Jameson.
Thank you. Thank you for this, Dan. Just on a really political note, we're putting the council tax up by suggesting 2.99. Would it make a tremendous difference if we put it up to, say, by 2.5? It would look better politically.
Chairman, thank you. As Dan pointed out, council tax for local authorities is really quite a key income stream, and you will notice that given the opportunity to raise council tax at the maximum amount, almost every council takes that, because we have suffered significant loss in terms of central government funding. So that's why we are presenting it at 2.99, the maximum. Taking a half % down. Bearing in mind that's 11p a week per person. The gesture back would be 2p probably, so it'd be 9p instead of 11p. So I think what you've got to do is look at the cumulative effect of an 11p increase, which is £116,000. And so we would prefer that 2.99% is something that's presented to full council. Clearly, it's up to members at full council to determine what they want to do. We would like any notification prior to council if there is an alternative coming, because we'd have to adjourn and redo all the numbers. But I don't think that anybody'd notice if you did it at 2.5.
I'll come back on that because I'm sure you're right, but I think it would look better. It would sell better than 2.99.
Councillor John Loss, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you were making your introduction, you mentioned the rates that are being charged to the leaseholder, I think is the right word, in Highcliffe Castle for the cafe part of it. Was that correct?
I don't believe so, Chairman. We had a question from Councillor Dedman that involved the income for Highcliffe Castle, which I answered. I believe that's the only discussion about Highcliffe Castle that we've had.
But it includes that amount of money that comes in from our sublease holder in the cafe portion of the castle.
Yes, that's right, Chairman. The figure that we were referring to is the income from the concession from the cafe.
Yeah. And if I remember rightly, because it's in my ward, that was set by full council.
Chairman, if I could come back on that point.
Done. Sorry.
Yeah, when it went through a formal tendering process, and so the council selected the most advantageous tender to the council, and obviously had to accept that tender. So nothing was actually set by the council.
So what has been proposed is okay for us to come to a decision on, even though these minutes will go to full council. It doesn't. I was just worried that it has to come back to council again because there's a slight alteration in it.
No, Chairman, it doesn't have to come back to council. What we're pointing out in the budget is an adjustment to next year's budget, because we were expecting income that was slightly higher than it's likely to be because of the Phoenix flies, and the closure at Highcliffe. So there's an expectation that income will be slightly lower. But as Dan's pointed out, it's significantly more than we did get from the previous concessionaire. But it doesn't need to come back to council for any more decisions.
Councillor Colin Bunchy, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm not interested in the politics. I'm interested in balancing the books. We're fighting LGR because this council has balanced its books by putting up council tax over recent years, unlike our neighbours and the rest of the county who have got major problems. Same as we've always, in recent years, paid our pension scheme up to date. We have no big black hole in our pension scheme. Oh, I'm getting a nod from... We were up to date. Don't tell me we've backslided. I'll come back to that. But what I wanted to ask was, I heard that some councils have been allowed to apply to central government to retain a higher percentage of the business rates, and it's being trialled in certain areas. Have we been involved in that or asked anything whether we could retain a higher level of the business rates? I may have been misinformed, but that's what I understood.
Thank you, Chairman. The government did intend to introduce 100% business rate retention, which was slightly misleading in that if you just read the headline, it meant that you retained all the business rates that you collected. Now, we collect 22 million, is it, Dan?
Yeah, 24.
24 million, but in effect, we only end up with about 1.6 or 7. So we would never be allowed to keep 22 million. There are, and the 100% business rate retention proposal didn't actually go forward. It stalled, and the actual finance paper didn't go forward into Parliament. They did still invite councils that are interested in actually being part of some pilots, and we did have a discussion in Dorset about that, but we did some work some time ago about being in a pool and about business rate retention, and we didn't think that at this point in time, given the uncertainty around LGR, that it would be sensible for us to go into one of those pilots. Because what will need to happen as part of the precursor to the funding for the two unitaries, if the Secretary of State does make his second -2 decision, is there have to be a complete recasting of the funding across Dorset that comes from central government. So to have actually set up and be part of the pilot for the business rate retention and do that as well would just add a kind of a complication that probably nobody ever really wanted.
Thank you.
So Mrs. Leslie Dedman, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking first of all at 6.2a. I'm sorry, I have to whiz around on my screen a bit here. So at 6.2, you're making the following assumptions and provisions: a pay award of 2%. But I note that at 35, I think it is, on one of the next pages. Yes, so it'll be page 41. Salaries relating to Two Rivers Meet Leisure Centre have increased by 4%. So how does that work? Or am I missing something? Is it 2 years at 2%, or what's the answer?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so that will incorporate the 2% pay award. It will also incorporate an element of increments as staff carry on working, into the next year, subject to satisfactory performance review. If they're not at the top of the scale, they can get an increment. So it will reflect that, and it will reflect a small amount of growth actually in the base budget as well.
Councillor John Loss, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't know that Councillor Bungay was going to mention the Dorset pension fund, or at least pension funds. I would, in that case, need I think, to ask for my membership of the Dorset Pension Fund Committee to be put into the minutes because I represent the district and borough councils of Dorset on that committee. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Right, debate. Councillor Bernie Davis, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, having read the officer's report, comment is included in the report that says increasing council tax is a decision that shouldn't be taken lightly, but the relatively low incremental increase recommended in this report will support the council's ambition, and this is very important, to maintain services and invest in the community. I think all members here would agree with that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mrs. Leslie Dedman, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think another speaker mentioned that perhaps we could increase it by a reduced amount, so not increase it so much. I don't know how that works. I'd just like to comment that we do a very good job at Christchurch, for which we seem sometimes to be penalised by being considered a wealthy and a wealthy council, which I'm sure the people around do not feel. But my feelings are very mixed. I'd like to say to the residents, oh, go on then, we have a free year of council tax. But I don't think the sort of people that are our residents would think that that was a good idea at all. I think we need to be, I think in the biblical term, only wise virgins. And sorry, Bernie, I'm making you blush over there. But no, I think we need to have the increase. I would, if the proposal to do it for 2.5 rather than 2.9, as more or less it just a slightly little gift to the taxpayer that you're taking for, what is it, 0.4% off. But no, I think it's a very good report, and I appreciate Dan answering the question so well. So yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good report. I'll wait to see what's proposed.
Very much. Councillor Mrs. Trish Jameson.
Thank you, Chairman. I am happy to propose this as set out. I would have liked to have seen less than the 2.99. I would quite like to see the 2.5. And I still don't know whether I'm going to propose it. It does make an awful lot of work. I think the fact that we have kept it under the 3%, we have got to keep living. We have got to keep living within our means. And the last thing we want is to have more cutbacks on staff, etc. at this difficult time. We are going through a very difficult time. So I will propose that it goes through as recommended with a 2.99%. And I believe Councillor Leslie Dedman is going to second.
Councillor Leslie Dedman, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I will propose as set out then. And yes, I agree with the proposer that we don't want to see any more staff cuts. We're doing very, very well as we are, but I don't think that staff cuts are the way to go anymore. So yes, I'll second this proposal.
So we go to the vote. I just wish really that if we'd had the local government reorganisation decision, we'd have more certainty. But it does seem that, it does seem that we're in an impossible position because we're putting it up by the 2.9 when we're already higher than Bournemouth by 150 at least a year. So it does concern me, but I should support it. Can we go to the vote then, please?
Unanimous.
Thank you very much. Number 6.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. So this report sets out the recommendations for the overall capital programme. In section 3, the report starts off by confirming the capital resources that are available to the council. So as part of the capital strategy, the council has accumulated £6.4 million of capital resources. The sources of this are confirmed in the table at paragraph 3.1 on page 47. A further £669,000 is profiled to be received in the following financial year, in 2018-19, and this relates to the new homes bonus and also the contribution from Dorset coastal communities towards the Highcliffe Castle zigzag scheme. To confirm no further contributions from the new homes bonus have been factored in after 2018-19. And this is consistent with the previous capital programme that's been approved by members and reflects concerns just around the sustainability of this funding. To clarify, whilst the exchange of contracts has occurred on the Bargate site, completion of the sale will still take some time. Therefore, the anticipated capital receipt is not included in this figure. So the proposed capital programme itself totals £6.9 million, and this is shown at Appendix 1. It's detailed there in line by line. There are some variations since last reported to Resources Committee in December, and these are listed in the table at paragraph 4.1 on page 48. The table at paragraph 4.3 on page 49 illustrates the anticipated profile of capital receipts and expenditure over the next 5 years. This shows that if the capital programme is approved, the uncommitted capital funds available to the council amounts to only £151,000. What this table also shows is that the vast majority of the programme spend is profiled for 2017-18 and 2018-19. So if local government reorganisation does go ahead, the ambition will be to complete or commit as much of this as possible, which should ensure that the vast majority of the council's current capital resources are actually spent in Christchurch. And the final point is just to say that the Scrutiny and Policy Overview Committee considered this report at its meeting on the 30th of January and unanimously agreed to recommend to Resources Committee that the capital programme as set out at Appendix 1 is approved. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that report. Questions, please, members. Councillor Colin Bunchy, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I totally agree with the expending as much as possible within Christchurch boundaries before it gets taken away from us, if the worst thing happens. I'm just wondering that if the Secretary of State sees sense and doesn't go ahead with the local government review, where does this leave us? Because obviously we have committed a lot of money. We don't have to spend it if we don't want to later on, can I ask? That's what I'm saying. I would hate to leave this. I mean, I totally agree with using Christchurch money for Christchurch people. No doubt about that. But if we don't go ahead with the review, I would hate this council to be left with minimal resources in a couple of years' time to carry on the good work. So how can you see us balancing the books should that happen, should the best scenario happen?
Chairman, as Liz pointed out, if you look at the capital programme at the moment, there is only about 151,000 of unallocated resource. You know, we know we've got hopefully the Bargate's capital receipt coming in, so that would be there to supplement the capital programme going forward. we're also hopeful that we will get a contribution from a site that is not too far from Highcliffe Castle in terms of income as well. We would start to probably direct New Homes Bonus to capital programme as well. There's that in there already.
For next year,
But for not so if the council does continue, we do know that we can supplement that 151,000 with probably about a couple of million. And of course we have got some unallocated reserves which would be supplemented by the headroom.
Any more questions? I'd like to ask one, if I may, because there are a lot of schemes in here that I think we should get done, and I do understand we should spend the money before we get taken over. And have we got the workforce? Because it does seem to me some projects I mentioned recently to officers, they just say they can't get them done because we haven't got the workforce. Can you explain if that's correct?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we're just going through that process now of actually assessing all the individual lines in both this capital programme and that of East Dorset, as you probably appreciate, to identify those that we can definitely start and complete and those that we can actually commit. Because I think the issue is we probably would put a hand on heart and say that by the end of 1819 you will not see that every single project is actually complete. But if we have contractually committed and entered into some agreement to continue with some of those schemes that aren't complete, then clearly they should still carry on.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mr. Geary.
Thank you, Chairman. Very pleased to see a report that has come before this committee. I'd like to see all the money that's all stacked away and it's still ours. On that note, I would be very pleased to propose the recommendation as set out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bernie Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm more than happy to second this. And I don't think this council will be taken over. It will be a new council.
Can we go to the vote then, please? And I shall vote.
Unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item 7.
You keep trying to do item 7.
And is it Liz again? Or?
Thank you, Chairman. So this report sets out the recommendation for the overall level and composition of reserves. I think probably the best place to actually direct members to is Appendix 1. This actually details the projected in-year movement on the Council's reserves. So it starts off on the column, the second column to the left, with the balance on each fund at the beginning of the year, and that totaled £11.7 million. The next three columns detail the estimated spender contributions during the year, and the final column gives the projected balance at the end of the year, and this totals £10.5 million. So of the total reserves forecast at the 1st of April, the majority is already earmarked, with approximately £4 million to fund the capital programme, about £1.5 million from third parties for specific purposes such as Section 106, contributions and grants from government departments, and a further £2 million being set aside to support key priorities such as the Growth Fund and the Local Plan Review. So overall, this represents a positive reserve position for the Council, and as set out in paragraph 2.2, it is important that this remains in place whether the Secretary of State confirms his Minder 2 decision or not. I think, again, just to highlight the Scrutiny and Policy Overview Committee considered this report at its meeting on the 30th of January, and again unanimously agreed to recommend to Resources Committee that the allocation and level of reserves as detailed in Appendix 1 to this report is approved. Thank you.
Question, members. No questions? We'll go to debate then. And I have the Mayor, Councillor Nick Geary, who want to propose. Oh. Right, Councillor Mrs. Steadman, please.
I don't know about a debate, but comment is it's always very easy to read, and I do actually understand it, which is always a good thing. I know I'm actually chair of the joint audit, so I should understand it, but no, thank you. It's a good report. Thank you, Chairman.
It is a very good report. It is clear I can even understand it. So, to Well, debate, yes. Councillor Burley-Day.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, very good report. Thank you for that. Happy to propose recommendations as set out.
Thank you very much. And Mr Mayor, will you second? I hope you're correct, Mr Mayor. We go to the vote, please. Those in favour?
Unanimous.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Treasury Management Strategy comes before members every year. Has to be approved before the start of the financial year. It encompasses 3 documents which you'll really see through the recommendations A, B and C. The Treasury Management Strategy and the Treasury Management Practices. There's not actually any change in them 2 documents from this time last year. They basically govern what the council can do in terms of investing its cash flows. The council looks at security and liquidity of its money before it looks at yield. And as I say, we're not proposing any changes. The 3rd document is the prudential indicators, which are actually they're quite a technical accounting indicator that we have to produce. They're quite valuable and interesting to an authority that has debt. That's where their main reason for being is. It's to see the affordability of debt. We are, of course, debt free. So I dare to say that they are not particularly illuminating for members, the prudential indicators. I think the most important part of this document, Chairman, is on page 69 to 70, which actually spells out the sort of organisations that the council can invest with. And, you know, as usual, as we are doing currently, we look to invest with organisations that have got a relatively high credit rating. I'll leave the introduction there, Chairman, and of course take any questions.
Thank you very much again. Members, just any questions? Well, Councillor Colin Bungey, please.
Just a quick one. I see in Appendix 3 we've taken our indicators through to 2020-21. I assume that's been done because of the necessity of, if local government review doesn't happen, then we have to have forecast ahead. If it does happen, these all become null and void anyway.
That's correct, Chairman. I mean, we're sitting here, and you know, all of the budget reports really, you know, assume that you know, the council will be a going concern until we've heard from the Secretary of State. You know, that's the most prudent thing to do. The actual timescales that you see in Appendix 3 are also actually prescribed by SIPFA, so we have to forecast a certain number of years in advance.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs. Leslie Dedman, please.
Yes, it's just a very brief question on item 10, I think I'm on page 78, about the staff training and qualifications, which I appreciate we do very carefully, but I want to just ask for the record, are we up to date with staff training? We're managing to do it, because I know that we're very, very pushed with all our staff. I know training is the thing that sometimes is left, so I'd like an assurance that we're still carrying on.
We certainly are. There's only a few people are authorised to carry out treasury management activities on behalf of the council. They tend to be the accountants. They're quite closely supervised. We have a lot of information and a good working relationship with Arlene Close, our treasury management advisors, and they come down and do a workshop for both staff and for members at least once a year. So.
Very much. Any further comment, debate? I have a proposer of the Deputy Vice Chairman and Mrs. Trish Jameson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, Dan, an easy paper to get hold of, and thank you very much for that. I'm very happy to propose as set out.
And I'm very happy to second, and then we go to the vote, please. Those in favour, please show. What's your vote?
Unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 9. Listen.
Thank you, Chairman. This report updates members with the Q3 revenue budget monitoring position. So you can see in paragraph 3.1 that the predicted revenue position at the end of the year is showing a surplus now of 148,000 compared to the 114,000 that was reported at Q2. This is approximately 0.5% of the gross £30 million budget, so effectively represents a balanced position. So the detailed variances across the service areas are shown in appendices 2 to 8. Since Q2, as you would expect, forecasts have been refined, but no significant new variances have been identified. Projected income has increased, mainly around car parking, and estimated savings on salaries arising from vacancies have also increased, mainly relating to legal and democratic services and property and engineering. So the Council's budget for 17-18 includes £451,000 of headroom. So the forecast surplus will increase this, meaning a net contribution to reserves of £599,000 is now projected at the year end. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Questions, members?
Just to say, Chairman, it's nice to know we're in such a good position.
Certainly is, Councillor. Any debate? Oh, sorry, Councillor Mrs. Ledley-Dedman.
Well, actually, it's sort of almost debate, but it was a question or a comment in that when we get down to page 89 with the development management salaries, we've been in that position, and I know this is a picture of what has been happening. The salary budget is overspent due to reliance on agency staff, pending recruitment, and I'm hoping to be able to hear or say myself, whichever. I think we're getting over that, and so the agency staff situation shouldn't be relevant for the next time.
Haven't you done very well? Thank you. Right, no further questions. We go to the vote, please. Those in favour? Councillor Bernie Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wish all reports were as easy as this one to deal with. Can I propose that we note the content of the report as recommended, Chairman? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'll second that report. Favour, please show.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much. Ten is the exempt item. We haven't got to get rid of the public. We haven't got any public here.
No, we've got to do representation.
Oh, representation, sorry. What's been handed out, hasn't it?
Yes, and we've got to do the agenda.
We've got 10 first, which is, item 10, which is the document that's been handed out.
It was the representation of yourself, Councillor Hall, and Councillor Phipps, who attended the Dorset Waste Partnership. The actual representation came to Community Committee, but it also comes here as well.
Any questions on this paper? That's item 10.
Excellent paper, as normal from Margaret.
That's good. So we can approve that.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Item 11, the forward plan, and we have our secretary, Sarah, to advise us.
Yeah, so working document, obviously there's not a lot on there for the next meeting, but I am sure we will have items at the next meeting. I can't imagine that we won't. So it'll be updated as and when we hear of reports that are coming through.
Thank you very much indeed. Any comment? Right. Exclude the public that aren't here.
And the press.
That's proposed and seconded. Of course.